All right. So welcome everybody to Artists and Their Art. Talking about the sculpture, or I hope I'm saying this right, scultore. Did I
See?
say that? Yeah, okay. All right, of Michelangelo, with Dr. Ellen Longsworth. And my name is Marty, and I'm the adult programming coordinator for the library. And it's my pleasure to host this tonight. And I'm just going to make you aware of a few things that are upcoming here at the library, both some things that are happening online, but also some things that are happening in the library itself. So this coming Friday, we are going to be having our blockbusting cinema at 12 noon in the Shivers Room, and we're focusing on movies that are turning 40 years old this year. And the first movie that we're showing as part of this is going to be, believe it or not, The Karate Kid. So I don't know if you can call it The Karate Kid anymore. It might be the karate middle-aged man now. But but anyway, we are going to be showing The Karate Kid at noon in the Shirus Room. Free popcorn for everybody, thanks to the friends. And then next Monday night at 6:30 p.m., it's Northwards and Music again with B.G. Bradley and some guests. I will be there being part of that show as well. And we have the Lake Effect, acoustic Lake Effect with Linda Smith and Seamus Collins, who are the musical act, and also actress Jackie Love will be there. And the theme for this Northwards and Music is going to be, appropriately enough for our time right now in the United States, surrealism. I think that's a pretty appropriate theme for our times right now.
Yeah,
So
well
that's
said, Marty.
so that's next Monday at 6:30 p.m. in the community room. And for those of you that do not live in the area, that will also be live streamed. So you should be able to catch that via our YouTube channel on Peter White live on Monday night. And then let's see, next Wednesday, we have an author who's going to be doing a presentation. It is, I'm looking at the wrong sheet here. It is novelist Steve Amick. He's going to be reading from his new book, which is called You Shall See Beautiful Things, a Nocturne and a Novel. And so he's going to be doing that in the Shirus Room, 6:30 p.m. on Wednesday, October 2nd. And we have other wonderful things coming up. I'll just highlight a couple of those. Next on Wednesday, October 9th at 6:30 p.m., we have Imagine a John Lennon Birthday Celebration with Russ Thorburn, Patrick Booth, and Dylan Trost are providing music. So that should be a really wonderful evening. And then just for those of you that are part of our or participate in or are excited for the Winter Wonderland Walk, the registration for registering for trees to decorate for that opens on October 14th. So please be aware of that coming up. Lots of other great stuff coming up. You can always look at our calendar to see that here at Peter White Public Library. But I'm going to turn things over to Ellen here. And I think you all know Ellen. Ellen is going to be talking, as I said at the beginning of my introduction, about Michelangelo Scultore. I'm really proud that I said that right. So anyway, I'm going to mute myself now, and I'm going to let Ellen take over. So it's all yours, Ellen.
I'm just trying to start my video here. Well, hi, y'all. It's really a pleasure to be here. Just so you know, no secrets. I'm going to be probably in and out of my viewing space. I caught that virus that's going around, so when my oxygen gets low, I have to kind of bone up. But right now, everything's copacetic. Okay, hope that doesn't put you off, but that's the deal. I decided to speak about Michelangelo this time because he follows so perfectly upon Donatello. And you'll see that, in fact, he was influenced in important ways by Donatello. certain sculptures of his. And one cannot talk about Michelangelo's sculpture in 20 minutes or 50 minutes. So this will be followed by a part 2. If I can get this to go, I'm good. Let's see. There we go. As you can see, this is the aged Michelangelo. It would have been painted probably sometime near his death in 1568 by his great friend Daniele Volterra. Michelangelo was born outside of Florence in 1475. So he had quite a long and certainly productive life. When he was a young teen, he was apprenticed to Domenico Ghirlandaio, who was a very famous Florentine painter. And when he was 14, he created something that looks like this, a mask of a faun. He was much taken with the antiques in Lorenzo de' Medici's garden. I guess I should say a little bit about Lorenzo. He was Il Magnifico, and he ruled in the, let's see, the 1470s and 80s, and he died in 1492. And that was a date, that was a year that marked the beginning of some really considerable changes in Michelangelo, but we're not there yet. In any event, somehow or another, he's walking around his sculpture garden. Lorenzo Magnificent, the Magnificent, espies this young man. He's about 14 years old. The beginning year that were given for the for this face, this mask, is 1489. In any event, he asks Ghirlandaio if he will allow this young man to come work for him. And so by 1490, Michelangelo is working for, and really more living with, the Medici, who are the ruling class, the ruling family of Florence, of course. I imagine y'all are aware of that, but in any event, they are. And so what happened to this face is that we're not quite sure this is Michelangelo's because it was lost. It was stolen in World War II, and it's never been recovered. So this is the best reconstruction that anyone's been able to make. But this is his first, literally, his first known work of art, and it is a sculpture. And this is a very famous painting, but as you can see, it's mid-17th century, but it adorns a very famous building, which is one of the places you want to visit in Florence if you want to see famous works of art. Originally, the Pitti Palace belonging to the Pitti family, of course. But here is Michelangelo. He's over to the right-hand side, this handsome young man, and he's presenting this head of a faun. And you'll notice that it looks nothing like what we think the original looked like. It's quite idealized, but he's presenting this head of a faun to his patron, or at this point, would-be patron, Lorenzo the Magnificent, who's sitting in the center, as you can see, quite engrossed in looking at this antique figure. And you can see a smile on his face. It's a lovely, lovely fresco. And one always refers to this in the context of this faun. Again, because we have no idea what it looked like. But the point being is, by the end of the 15th century, in Italy especially, the antique reigned. And so anything that smacked of the antique and was it all viable, was all good, was highly regarded. Hence the regard that this unfortunately lost head of a faun was given by this to this young man. Now, when Michelangelo was in Lorenzo Magnificent's household, he met this artist, Bertoldo di Giovanni, who also worked for the Medici. And you'll see a little better view of this relief in a moment. But here is yet another artist, older, more experienced, certainly, who has created a bronze relief. That's quite technical, by the way, that I'm not gonna go into how you make a bronze relief, but it's a lot of work, which is, as you can see from the title, was created in the ancient manner. That is what you have. And let's go to the next slide so you can see this a little bit better. Isn't that gorgeous? The figures are piled one upon the other. There's a tremendous amount of energy. This is a battle that focuses on Hercules, but don't ask me where Hercules is because I have yet to find it. But the figures are, for all intents and purposes, but for some battle gear, and you see a couple of female graces. They're nude, and even the horses are incredibly involved. You see them around framing the top of this relief primarily. A reconstruction of a battle that, I don't know, I think you and I would want to be part of. Really ferocious, very ferocious. But my point is here, the overlapping of the figures, the nudity of the figures, the energy of the relief, the overall dynamism of this work is antique. And this artist was influenced himself by Michaelangelo, who was also a very fine Florentine artist, who was most famous, actually, I think, for this particular work, an engraving. That means it's ink on a soft metal. Battle of 10 Nudes. This is a very famous work. Probably some of you know this. But here is Bertoldo di Giovanni's kind of starting place. And what he did with this is just extraordinary, isn't it? There's dynamism here, but there's great clarity. That's Michaelangelo, not the subsequent artist. And then, oh, sorry, other way, sorry. We see Bertoldo di Giovanni's relief again by way of comparison. So we have it side by each, so to speak, in our heads. All right, let's go. There we go. And Bertoldo Giovanni became a teacher of Michelangelo's. I don't think you could call him a teacher in a formal manner, but Michelangelo was much influenced by him. So here is, after the head of a faun, Michelangelo's first work in marble. It's a relatively small relief. It's in the Casa Buonarroti, which means the house that he lived in eventually, in Florence. And I think you can see some of the similarities. I hope you can. The nudity and the energy, and oh, there's a fellow with a beard over on the left-hand side about to throw a stone at somebody, probably kill him with one blow, and so on. It does have a subject, as you can see from the title, It's the Battle of Lapis and Centaurs. This is an historical, mythological event which took place after a wedding of a young woman by the name of Hippodamia. I'm sorry, I don't have her name printed out here. And a young man, of course. And Hippodamia counted as some of her family friends centaurs. And so they were invited to the wedding. And after the ceremony, which was overseen, by the way, by a Greek god, by Apollo, in fact. So it was a very important union. So the centaurs just drank themselves silly and started a kind of battle with the Lapith men. Now I have a couple of details, and I want to make sure that you see one in particular. Now it looks like there are only male figures here. And here's one of the figures with the stone. And notice, by the way, this is unfinished. Michelangelo came to have the reputation of non finito, F-I-N-I-T-O, not finished, for, as we will continue to see, obvious reasons, non finito. He gets so far in his presentation of what he wants to create, and then sometimes exterior circumstances get in the way, but otherwise, he's done. He's done all that he can do. In any event, so you notice heads look like rocks, and some of the torsos are quite beautifully polished. So there is finish there, but you can see that the background, what you see in between the figures, for instance, still holds chisel marks. And so kind of as a what I want to say, a PS here, what you can learn from a sculpture like this is how Michelangelo worked, and we'll see more of this as well. Personally, from the point of view of an art historian and one who has worked in the arts, but not marble, it's fascinating to be able to trace how an artist created something, as opposed to seeing the final product and you can't really tell very well how it was put together. But in any event, you can here. Okay. This figure right in the center of this detail is Hippodamia, the only female figure in this relief. And as you'll see in the next detail, she, I would say, for the most part, establishes the center of the action. Although she's not doing anything, she's just being grabbed. But it's a beautiful figure, and the only female here, the bride. So you see her again here, and you can see how Michelangelo has positioned her so that she takes on, even though she's lower in the relief, a certain prominence. Now, we don't know, by the way, and I'll be saying this somewhat frequently, why Michelangelo created this work. And all you can say is because he wanted to. And he was so influenced by his mentor. Any questions or comments? Now, this is a work which actually he probably created after the Battle of the Centaurs, the Lapis and Centaurs. But I'm placing it here, but because it creates a kind of segue into a conversation over Donatello. This is a work that Michelangelo created when he was living at the Medici Palace, in the Medici Palace. You see the dates correspond with what I said before, 90 to 92. We don't know why he made it. Again, undoubtedly because he wanted to. And it partakes of, if you were with me last time, the relief style that Donatello created, never seen ever in the art world, called rilievo schiacciato. I think I have that. There we go. Rilievo schiacciato. It means flattened relief. And we'll see Donatello in a moment. Here, however, although the two, we'll call them angels, okay? Although they don't have wings. Well, maybe we'll just call them little boys. At the top of the stairs are very slightly carved, lightly carved into the marble. Look at the baby Jesus on his mother's lap. He's a little Hercules. And he's often described by that. I remember my mentor calling him a little Hercules. He's muscular. He's got density. And so does she in her hands, in particular, her right hand that grasps her mantle. Now her face, the profile of her face is really very lightly carved from a marble. But here's my point. This is Michelangelo's understanding and iteration of rilievo schiacciato, which has bulk, which has volume, which has a physical presence, and this is Michelangelo. You might recall the St. George, and he's not the subject here, but the relief at the base of the statue is the first example of rilievo schiacciato. I don't want to dwell here. I think you can see for yourselves the differences. This relief is very, very subtly, lightly carved. There is, some relief, a little greater relief given to the Madonna, whom St. George is saving from the vicious fangs of the dragon. And of course, the dragon and St. George are also given prominence in terms of some mass. But what has for years astounded me about this relief, and I don't know that I mentioned this last time, is the colonnade against which you see the Virgin, and then in the distance, and it's a far, far distance, you see trees, a little bit of other vegetation, hills maybe. And Donatello has created this vision, this atmospheric perspective, not the columns, but the landscape, by the use of his chisel, so very subtly. But that's not Michelangelo. And I thought you might like to see this work again. As you can see, it hangs in the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. As with the Madonna of the Stairs, we don't know why Donatello created the Madonna of the Clouds. But I wanted to show this to you again because I'm not sure that I mentioned to you when we did look at it. I wrote a paper on this work a long time ago, and I measured the relief of the Madonna's nose, 3 centimeters. And look at the shadow it casts as opposed to other portions of the relief, 3 centimeters. That's Donatello. Now, I find this work particularly interesting It's as you can see, Christ on the cross, which was lost for years. And it's Michelangelo's, I should say. It's not Donatello's. It was rediscovered in a convent where it didn't belong in 1962. And then it was reinstalled where it does belong and where you see it here in the Basilica of Santo Spirito in Florence. The figure of Christ itself is 4.5 feet inches tall. It looks a lot longer, taller than that, but that's the measurement. And I wanted to share a little bit of its history with you because I find it absolutely fascinating. And I hope you do too, and also the work. Michelangelo created this sculpture when he was 18 years old. And he was living with the Augustinian monks in Santo Spirito following the death of Lorenzo de' Medici. So that means you can see the date 1492, Il Magnifico's death date. And what the monks allowed him to do was make anatomical studies of the corpses in the church's attached hospital. This had to have been a revelation for Michelangelo. Another first, like his contact with Bertoldo di Giovanni and the ancient sculpting style. In any event, this was hung on their high altar in that same year in 1492. And then we don't know what happened as it got moved, but found again, thankfully. So I liked this photograph in particular because it really gives you, at least I hope it does, gives you a sense of being there. And I have several other photographs to show you. So looking up at this figure, what you can see is a very distinct contrapposto. That means literally one portion of a form placed against the other. It's an asymmetrical kind of arrangement. So here you have knees bent in one direction, torso very subtly oriented in another. And again, I didn't spell it out for you. I hope you can figure it out. Contrapposto. This isn't such a good slide. It's a little light. It's a little fuzzy. But it's the finest one I could find of virtually the entirety of the form. Christ, as you can see, is hanging very gently on the cross. This is very unlike Michelangelo. And as you can see, the figure is extraordinarily thin, in good shape, muscled, thin. This is a nice slide. His head is bent down. Of course, he's now talked to his father and given up to God, as he was to do. This is a polychrome sculpture, by the way, which means that it has been painted. And interestingly enough, although this is not unusual, when it was first discovered again, or discovered, it was so heavily painted that experts were sure it could not have been by Michelangelo. But cleaned, it was discovered that in fact it was by the young artist. Now I want you to contemplate this face, this long, thin nose, full but small lips, a very distinct iteration of basically the facial features, don't you think? Which are then complemented by and framed by that rather ruly bit of hair, little beard. This is such an unusual figure for Michelangelo because, well, I think so, because of the gentility of it, the lack of mass. And there are many massive crucifixes out there subsequently. I think it's exquisite. Hope you do too. You'll see it again. Now, I have something to share with you, and I hope that I'm not going to kind of overstep my bounds here. This is, wait a minute, we want to go back here first. Hold on, here's where I want to start. I'm sorry. This is the, as you can see, the Arca di San Domenico. So it's in honor of Saint Dominic. And it stands in the church of, or the Basilica of San Domenico in Bologna. As you can see here, it was established long before Michelangelo was born by Niccolo Pisano, one of the finest artists of the 14th century, 13th and 14th century, I should say. As you can see, this is a 13th century date in any event. And then another extraordinarily fine artist, Niccolo del Arca, picked up basically where Pisano had left off and died in 1494. In that year, Michelangelo took over and completed the few sculptures which were at that point missing from this work. But let me back up. In 1492, as I've said, Michelangelo's patron, Lorenzo il Magnifico, died. By that time, Michelangelo had been there for 2 years in the Medici Palace. As we understand it, Lorenzo the Magnificent had become Michelangelo's second father. His father was still living, but Lorenzo the Magnificent was, you know, his dad. He died. And Michelangelo left Florence. Can you imagine? How old is he? He's 17, 18 years old, something like that. Yeah. And he fled. He probably was very frightened. And he fled north to Bologna. And he came under the wing of a prominent citizen there in Bologna, who was responsible for setting him up with this commission, finishing the Arca of San Domenico. And I don't know if you know your saints or not, but in Italy, San Domenico is kind of a big deal. I mean, look at this Arca. An Arca, by the way, is a tomb. And at the end of my presentation of this work, I'll show you the, well, it's not a grave, but it's an altar kind of inside the altar where Saint Dominic is honored. So, as you can see, this is a very grand monument, numerous stories, and we're not going to by any means look at much but what Michelangelo created, okay? So you could say you got lucky. And these were the first works that he created outside of Florence. Now, what I was about to say is, I wrote a paper on this Arca. And I'm going to, you can leave anytime you want. I'm going to read you the first paragraphs, the introduction to this paper, because I think that it very well, if I may say so, sets the tone, not only for what Michelangelo created here, but something else as well, which takes us back to Donatello. So please bear with me. Giorgio Vasari, in his Lives of the Most Excellent Painters, Sculptors, and Architects, published in 1568, tells us that Michelangelo, quote, used no fixed point of view, devoting his energies rather to adapting the figures to the disposition than a disposition to the figures. So let's look at a little bit of this. So he's adapting the location of the figures and their design, and not the location. What do I want to say? He's designing the figures to interact properly, artistically, as he wants them, with where he places them, and not vice versa. The place governing the design of the figure. That's what Vasari has just told us. Michelangelo said, and this is Vasari, that it was necessary to have the compasses in the eye, not in the hand. That's such a famous statement, whether Michelangelo said that or not, but it's true. What you see and not what you measure is what you want, if you're Michelangelo. One is reminded of the story by Vasari in his Lives concerning Donatello's marble statue of St. Mark, and you'll see him in a few moments, carved between 1411 and 1413 for the niche assigned to the Linen Drapers Guild on the exterior of Or San Michele in Florence. Oh heck, let's just go forward and we'll come back. Here he is. You might remember him from last time. An absolutely one of a kind at the time, exquisite sculpture. At Or San Michele, for the Linen Drapers Guild, Donatello made St. Mark the Evangelist. This figure is executed with such judgment and love that when it stood on the ground, the consuls of the guild were not disposed to accept it. But Donatello asked them to let him set it up in the niche, since he wanted to demonstrate that after some retouching, the figure would appear entirely different. This was done. Donatello screened the statue from view for 15 days, and then, without having touched it otherwise, he uncovered it, whereupon everybody was filled with admiration and praised the figure as an outstanding achievement. I love that. Didn't touch it. Fooled the heck out of those people. Although this incident may very well be apocryphal, the veracity of numerous biographical anecdotes included by Vasari in his Lives has been called into question by scholars, in fact. Anyway, this attests to the fact that Donatello conceived of the figure in relationship to its position in the Gothic niche in which it was to be situated. In isolation, or when placed on the ground, as in Vasari's anecdote, or when the statue is photographed, as if standing on a horizontal plane continuous with our own. We see what the consuls of the linen drapers saw, a top-heavy, long-waisted figure. Using the judgment of his eye, the giudizio dell'occhio, judgment of the eye, Donatello created the magisterial image of St. Mark, whose final form was guided by optical adjustments that were in turn governed by conditions imposed by the site, the Gothic niche, and the height at which the statue was to be positioned. Now, here's the point. Well, the second point. We know that Michelangelo greatly admired Donatello's St. Mark. Vasari reports that a citizen of Florence, quote, once found him contemplating, end quote, the statue. The Saint Mark, Vasari goes on to say, had so graceful a stance and so venerable an air that Michelangelo used to say that he had never seen anyone who had the bearing of an honest man to a greater degree than this figure. And if Saint Mark resembled this statue, his words certainly inspired belief. And so we can return now to the Arca. I hope that made some sense. And this is Michelangelo's figure of Saint Petronius. So different saints decorate the Arca in honor of Saint Dominic, of course. And Saint Petronius, as you can see, he's carrying a model of a city. It's the patron saint of Bologna. Okay, so he's an important guy. And what I want you to notice here, and this photograph isn't as good as it should be. It should be a little angled, more angled upward. But what I want you to notice is the density of the drapery and the way the drapery, as in the Saint Mark, falls around, I should say, is arranged around the limbs, arms, hands not so much, but arms, waist, legs. He is standing in a contrapposto. His left knee, you can see, is slightly poking into the drapery so that we know that it's bent, while his right leg is straight because the drapery tells us that, okay? And that's exactly what we see here. It's opposite limbs, and it's much more fluid, much more dynamic. I think you see that without a problem because it's Michelangelo. And what this sculpture is doing, what this figure is doing, very clearly, is he's stepping forward. He's not just standing on, where is he? There, on the third level of the Arca. He's on the slanted roof. He's the one to the left, but not on the corner, with the model of the city. Okay, active. That's Michelangelo. And look at the way his hands are supporting that city easily, but very clearly, strongly. I love that left hand, for instance. And otherwise, he's looking out in honor, of course, that's why he's there, of Saint Dominic. Now, on the other side of the Arca, there was another space that needed to be filled by a sculpture. And here the arrow helps us out. This is Michelangelo's young Saint Proclus. And let me see. There you see him. Look at him. His right fist is clenched. His long cape is furled over his shoulder. You can see that his tunic is wrinkled, active. He's also just not standing there. When I saw this figure, I was sure that he was ready to just jump right off the Arca. The energy that is expressed by this figure is extraordinary. Now, there are no other figures like this. The Proclus, the Saint Petronius, none, absolutely none. They They are new. They are innovative. And what one source said, and I think it's kind of silly, but I'll mention it anyway, is that when Michelangelo was creating this work, actually, it's part of my conversation, but I don't really believe this. He was thinking about the David. Now, the David dates from, let me see, 10 years hence. I don't think he was thinking about the David, but look at this. The Proculus becomes the figure of David. We don't have to go there now. In various details, without the kind of the reserve of this giant figure. Now, there's another figure on this arca that I think is as extraordinary as either one of the ones you've just seen. And that takes us to the lower right-hand corner to one of the two candelabra bearing angels. And here you can see Michelangelo's angel here closest to us. And I want you to notice that it turns the corner. And this comparison helps you see Michelangelo's candelabra bearing angel in contrast with Nicolo del Arca's candelabra bearing angel to the far left, which was designed by del Arca to correspond perfectly with the horizontal, or I should say horizontals and verticals of the overall design of the arca. But that's Nicolo del Arca, a reserved, very, very fine artist. No qualifications necessary. But Michelangelo's angel moves, turns the corner for us. So you're there looking at the arca, and there's the angel kind of saying, oh, come on, come around the corner and to the other side of the arca. And look at the bulk of this figure, as opposed to that dainty, delightfully sweet angel of Nicolo del Arcas. It's another chapter, as I said in another way earlier. And then the best I could do to show you the shrine that's actually embedded in this magnificent arca is what you see here. It's not terribly good, but it's located, perhaps you can see a bit of it below the Proculus, not exactly, but it's as you can see, it's lighted, and that's where artifacts honoring Dominic have been placed. Any questions or comments? Well, sometime when Michelangelo, I think, was still in Bologna. I'm not quite sure about this. Or he might have gone back. I think he went back to Florence, frankly. He created a figure of what we call a sleeping Cupid. Let me go forward just one slide here, and we'll come back to this painting. This is not Michelangelo's sleeping Cupid. It's probably not even the prototype that he knew, but he knew something like this. This delightful little mythological figure, sound asleep. And again, it's the antique inspiring the young artist. And so he created a sleeping Cupid. We have no idea what it looked like because let me see. It was created in 1496, but it was subsequently lost. However, we're not sure when it was lost. So returning to this painting by the workshop of another very fine 15th, early 16th century artist, Giulio Romano. This sleeping Jupiter, as it's called here, might be a copy of, or an iteration of Michelangelo's Sleeping Cupid, now lost, as I said. Michelangelo, with the advice of, you know what good friends are for, they give you advice of all kinds and sometimes get you in trouble, and sometimes it's really for the best. One of Michelangelo's cohorts, when he saw this figure, apparently, said, you know what? You should use acetic acid and age it and pass it off as an authentic ancient work. And so he gave it to someone to take to Rome to do just that. As my source says, this is one of the most important fakes and notorious fakes of all time. He sold his representative sold the sculpture to Cardinal Raffaello Riario. Here's his name. His name's here in the caption. For, dig this, 200 ducats. Now, I looked that up in modern money. A ducat would be worth today. And I imagine something like this. Then $150. And so Cardinal Riario paid something like $30,000 for this sculpture. And then, Michelangelo's representative gave him like 10%. He lied to him about how much he'd sold it to Riario. Now, Cardinal Raphael Riario was a big deal as a cardinal, and he also was extraordinarily interested in antique works, which this clearly indicates. In any event, he found out it was a fake, and he had a fit, but he didn't blame Michelangelo. What he did was he called Michelangelo to him and asked him to sculpt for him an antique-inspired statue. And hence the creation of Michelangelo's famous figure of Bacchus, which, by the way, and this is just new data that's come to light with art historians looking into Riario's bank account, something like that. Anyway, expense account. He paid Michelangelo 3 installments of 150 ducats each for this sculpture. So that's not 30,000, but that's $22,500 in our money for this sculpture. It's a one of a kind, and we're going to look at some details before I tell you what happened to it. Okay, it's over life size. Oh wait, I don't want to do that yet. It's over life size, slightly, and it exists in the Bargello. It's a famous museum in Florence. And as you can see, Bacchus, as you would expect, is tipsy. And the wonderful satyr, which Michelangelo has placed, it's part of the story, of course, of Bacchus and his drinking habits and so forth, and his friends. But the satyr provides support for this figure because, as you can see, it's standing in a contrapposto, but it's tipsy. It's not steady. And so the vertical of the satyr provides that stability for the sculpture. I mean, in actuality, okay? And I thought a back view would be useful. I think back views of sculptures like this can tell you a lot. I don't know that see that much here, but in any event, you can see the satyr's face. He's staring blankly, not even at his cup, and I'll get back to that in a moment, but kind of out away from himself. And he's just basically drunk. Now, this drawing, we'll get back to the sculpture in a moment, but this drawing was created, as you can see, in the early 16th century of the Bacchus in a sculpture garden that didn't belong to the cardinal, but to this other man, Jacopo Galli, who was, as you can see, a collector of antiques, very famous. I mean, this Jacopo Galli was an important figure at this time. He wasn't an artist, but he was a collector, as you can see, as I said. And you see the Bacchus here. It's a very fine rendering by Van Heemskerk, who was Dutch, who came to Italy in the 1530s, and created a lot of drawings of famous works, famous places, architecture, sculpture, and so on and so forth. So anyway, you see that the Bacchus has no cup in his hand. At some point, he was broken off. And you can perhaps see also that his penis has been broken off. And subsequently, the cup is replaced, as you can see, but the other is not, which is neither here nor there. But just so you know that we don't know that cup is exactly, where it should be in relationship to the figure. And, art historians are fussy about things like that. Oh, sorry. Interestingly enough, my sources tell me that Michelangelo knew Ovid's Metamorphoses, which evokes Bacchus and his incredible processions. And I'm going to treat you to a couple of quotes here. From Ovid. Follow you are followed by Bacchantes, the satyrs, and the old man who supports his tilting limbs and who has difficulty standing on the hunchback of his donkey. And then there's Vasari, who has something to say about the Bacchus, of course. Now, Giorgio Vasari, by the way, bless his heart. If we did not have his work, which recounts not only artists' lives, but historical circumstances and works of art, which actually go back, he handpicks his his subjects, but goes back into the late 14th century and then forward to the cutoff date, which is 1568, we would be missing a lot. So in any event, here's Vasari again. He says of the Bacchus, in this figure, we recognize that Michelangelo sought to restore a certain union of the two sexes, giving him the slender shape of a young man and the fleshy roundness of women's forms. Something admirable, and which showed that he was definitely superior in sculpture to all the modern masters who had worked up to that time. And one other, and then I've got to take me off the screen for a bit. Bacchus embodies inexhaustible youth. He is, quote unquote, the eternal child, the most beautiful being who attracts glances from the heights of the heavens. Well, guess what? Cardinal Riario didn't appreciate anything about this figure because he sold him. He rejected this figure as he rejected the Cupid and sold it to Jacopo Galli. Be right back. Okay. All right. I'm fine. Now, in terms of chronology, the next work, yeah, the next work that Michelangelo created was the Pietà. It's an interesting work, and I don't say that flippantly. It's probably the work by Michelangelo with which you all are most familiar. A colleague of mine by the name of William Wallace is one of the premier Michelangelo scholars. And as you can see from this, this caption, this work was commissioned from Michelangelo by a French cardinal, Jean de Bellière, for his funeral chapel in Old St. Peter's. So let me explain and get to Bill again. Before the St. Peter's we know was built, there was a much smaller church that, I don't know if I could, I had thought I should have brought in a plan for you, but when the present St. Peter's was constructed, this smaller old St. Peter's was still attached at the altar end to the, to the new building, but not for long. In any event, before the new building was constructed, this cardinal paid to allow his burial in the old St. Peter's, a fairly small, round, like the new St. Peter's, at least, the dome area, round building. Now, what William Wallace is not sure of, and I guess it really doesn't make a whole lot of difference to us, except his arguments are always so very fine. If you're interested, you should note his name. He's not positive that this work was created, first of all, as a tomb sculpture, or first of all, as an altarpiece. But what we do know is what we're looking at here is wrong. It was originally positioned on the floor of this chapel in Old St. Peter's. So you didn't look up at it, you looked down at it, or across and down at it, which makes perfect sense as you contemplate the visage of the Madonna and her relationship to her son. Okay. What you should also know about this sculpture is that it is carved from one whole piece of marble, which is extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. Another first to be sure. No one else could have done this. No one. Now let's think about this. How old is Michelangelo? The Pietà was created between 1498 and 99. So he was born in 1475. He's still a very young man. He's still experimenting and still innovating. Let's see if I can get this going. Come on. There we go. There we are. Notice how he has created a very deep, broad, what do I want to say, pedestal. It's not exactly the word I want, but for Christ's body and the way in which the body is positioned within the Madonna's lap. The figure of Christ has been given a contrapposto, and his head lolls back as if asleep. The figure really doesn't look dead by any means. You see the stigmata in his right hand, also in his side. I'm not sure you can see that too terribly well here. And you can see that his mother is clothed in this thick, wavy drapery. There's nothing, smooth and what do I want to say? Simple about how she's been clothed. And this is in contrast, you see, with her son's body, which is, as you can see, beautifully polished, smooth, muscular, certainly. A very different Christ from the Christ he created when he was 18, huh? This is a grown man. And she looks down at him, as you can well see, supporting his back with one hand, and then with her left hand, we can read that gesture in a couple ways. She's, as it were, gesturing, pointing him out, and or blessing him. Maybe a combination of the two. The sculpture of Christ is extremely modest, you'll notice, with a loincloth over his groin. The other Christ was not so treated, and not necessarily are they. And I was trying to find a photograph which would show you how Michelangelo carved this work, but I couldn't. But the way in which he carved it, experts have come to agree, is he's standing at Christ's legs, okay? And he's carving across the body. He's not carving from the front inward necessarily. And that makes perfect sense given the overall design of the figure of Christ. And here we get a little closer to Mary and to Christ. See, he doesn't look dead, does he? Not like the wooden Christ. He's peacefully asleep in his mother's arms. And here you see Mary, soft, rounded forms, very subtle, very fine, of her lips, her nose, her almost totally closed eyes as she gazes down at her son. I was struck by the similarity between that face, physiognomically, anyway, the treatment of the features are different, sorry. But the feeling you get here of Mary's soul, that's what I see shining forth here subtly, is very similar to what we see in that early Christ. Gentler, but still subtle, soft. I think so. And then I thought you might like this close-up of Mary. Doesn't give you an impression of the marble very, very well, but you can see the overall softness of the marble, especially in this carving of her face. Michelangelo signed this work. That's another famous detail. And the caption I put is to tell you why, because when this sculpture was finished, someone said, and we're in Rome, we're not in Florence, someone said, Cristoforo Solari carved this work. And Cristoforo Solari was a very fine sculptor, but he didn't carve this work. This is the first work that Michelangelo will sign. He signs very few. And you might want to notice it doesn't show up as well as I would have liked, but as the words Michelangelo Buonarroti made this work works into the upper portions of the Madonna's dress. Bill Wallace says that he meant to carve this after all, because there are, to sign it after all, because there are indications underneath that Bill thinks that he would have he would have carved in the first place, and then the entire signature, but we don't know. We don't know. In 1972, maybe some of you remember this, this person rushes into the basilica, takes a hammer to the Madonna. Her nose is missing here. Her left hand is missing. And since repaired, of course. But how horrible. Okay, I'm looking at my watch. We're way over time here. How are we doing, Marty?
Well, we are over time. I didn't know how much more you had left to go, but
I have lots.
okay. Well, do we want to say?
But there's 3 months from now.
Yeah, and we are going to have another artist in their art focused on Michelangelo in 3 months as well. So, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize. I just was having such a good time here.
You know what? I was enjoying it too. I hadn't even looked at my time either. So, well, do you want to stop there with Pieta?
I think
And
that's a,
then
yeah, I think that's a good place to stop because, um, this takes us, getting back to Donatello here,
mhm.
takes us on another trip, as it were.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll stop at the Pieta. And for those of you that are on the edge of your seats, we are getting to David, but that will be in that will be in December. Ann Fisher said thanks as always. So
Well, thank you, Marty. Thank you. Thank you all
yeah.
for being here.
Yeah,
Sure, really
thank
appreciate
you
it.
so much, and get well. I
Yep,
hope you keep on getting healthier and healthier, Ellen. So
working on it.
yeah, yeah. And
Okay.
everybody else that's here, stay healthy. There's lots of nasty stuff going around right now. So does anybody have any final comments or want to have a question or something that they want to ask?
Oh, hi, Meg. Hi, hi.
All right.
Anything at all? Okay.
All right. I'm gonna stop recording here and I'll just